Hey everyone, I am your host Peter Zablocki and you're listening to History Shorts. I hope everyone's having a great day so far and thank you for making this show a small part of that. If you'd like to help me out with a small gesture, please leave History Shorts a rating or a review and click that subscribe button if you haven't already done so. For sources and books used as the basis for these episodes, how to advertise on the show, and other information such as a list of our upcoming guests on the Conversation series, or a link to our Patreon account where you can listen to exclusive episodes not heard here, please visit www.historyshortspodcast.com. Today's episode is brought to you by the Podcast Republic, your ultimate podcast listening app. Discover and subscribe to thousands of podcasts from around the globe, all in one place. Download Podcast Republic now and take your podcast experience to the next level. Having said all of that, on August 8th, 1963, just after 3 a.m., the quiet Buckinghamshire countryside was electrified by one of the most daring heists in British history. A Royal Mail train hurtling down the West Coast Main Line was stopped at a signal deliberately manipulated by a meticulously planned gang drifting in blue boiler suits. In under 20 minutes, they had ripped open sacks of cash, bundles worth £2.6 million, ransacked the train, and vanished into the night. This was not a robbery. It was a feat of criminal spectacle that gripped the nation, inspired lasting legends, and fundamentally changed both policing and crime in post-war Britain. Here is the rest of that story.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
In the early 1960s, Britain was a nation on the cusp of profound change. The post-war years of rationing and austerity were given way to the promise of modern prosperity. The Beatles were about to redefine pop culture, and the country's criminal underworld, long ruled by old-school smash-and-grab artists, was evolving into something more organized, more ambitious, and more cinematic. It was against this backdrop of shifting social mores and rising media influence that one of the most daring crimes in British history unfolded, the Great Train Robbery of 1963. At a time when most crimes were small-scale and opportunistic, this heist was a masterpiece of planning and nerve. And it wasn't just about the money, which in today's money is about £46 million. It was about the spectacle of the whole event. The robbery quickly became a national obsession, sparking a massive manhunt, sensational trials, and a legacy of fascination that would endure for decades. From the start, the robbery exuded daring precision. Bruce Reynolds, the gang's mastermind, and his lieutenant Gordon Goody had spent months plotting every step. Acting on inside intelligence supplied by a mysterious postcard postal worker known only as the Ulsterman, they learned the mail train carried vast sums in sterling notes pending delivery to banks after the summer holiday. They chose a remote stretch of track, near Cheddington, isolated, straight, and covered only by a modest bridge that would serve as their rendezvous point. At Sears Crossing, the signal was overridden by a covered green light and a battery feeding red. The unsuspecting driver, Jack Mills, pulled smoothly to a halt. What followed read like a gangster film infused with British understatement. 15 men, Buster Edwards, Charlie Wilson, Roy James, Jimmy White, Ronnie Biggs, and others, swarmed the engine, disabling Mills and the second crewman, David Whitby, with rough strikes, but no guns. They then carefully detached the high-value package coach and drove the front sections to the overhead bridge, standing like a silhouette in the early morning gloom. A human chain then handed 120 mailbags, over 2.5 tons of cash, into waiting lorries. 8 mailbags were left behind when the alarm's 30-minute lock-in began, and the crooks dispersed into stolen cars to rendezvous at Leatherslade Farm, their hideout for the coming days. Inside the farmhouse, luxury matched the loot. Breakfast on silverware, cash on the table, and a game of Monopoly where gang members mapped out who would get their share. Amidst the happiness, stains of recklessness emerged, namely fingerprints on the board and dough left in the kitchen. Police quickly traced the hideout thanks to locals alerted by unusual activity. When officers arrived, they found it almost abandoned, the getaway under too much haste, leaving behind evidence that would later seal the gang's fate. In the aftermath, the investigation became a national obsession. Buckinghamshire's Chief Superintendent Malcolm Futrell initiated the first response from Aylesbury, then turned the case over to Scotland Yard's hard-charging flying squad under Tommy Butler. Within days, 3 informants emerged, 1 male convict and 1 woman, who cut through the gang's anonymity, helping police map the conspiracy's core members. The gang's image was plastered on front pages and broadcast over radios. Arrests followed. Corderay was the first to fall, traced by a tip-off after careless rent payment in small denomination notes. The infamous Leather Slade Farm fingerprints dragged in many more. By January of 1964, 11 gang members, including the planners Gordon Goody, violent enforcer Charlie Wilson, and youthful insider Ronnie Biggs, stood trial. The courtroom at Aylesbury, temporarily expanded to accommodate crowds and press, became the stage for 51 days of courtroom drama, featuring 613 exhibits and 240 witnesses. On February 15, 1964, the verdict shattered the gang's bravado. 7 members received a maximum 30-year sentence. Others were dealt 24 or 25 years. Though John Daly walked free, he had no case to answer. His only involvement? A Monopoly fingerprint found from a shared moment at the hideout. Ball and Field would later be exonerated. Even so, the length and severity of the judgments shocked a public used to more moderate sentences. Despite the convictions, 4 key figures escaped, most famously Ronnie Biggs. He fled to Brazil and, despite splashes in tabloids and documentaries, lived openly until 2001. Biggs famously returned to Britain on his own terms, longing to buy a print in Margate pub before being rearrested and released on compassionate grounds in 2009. He died in 2013, having only ever served about 8 years of his sentence. The other fugitives had varied fates. Jimmy White, the adoptive locksmith thief, remained at large for years before capture. Bruce Reynolds, who enjoyed years of extravagant living in Mexico and Canada on his stolen wealth, returned to the UK in 1968, where he was finally arrested and given that 25-year sentence, though he served about only 10. Gordon Goody, reformed, moved to Spain, where for decades he ran a quiet bar and was known as a genial neighbor, even as he retained details about the Ulsterman, later alleged to be postal clerk Patrick McKenna, who had supplied insider information to the gang. The train driver, Jack Mills, never recovered emotionally from the attack in that engine cab. Although physically able to return to duty briefly, he lived with trauma and died in 1970. David Whitby died of a heart attack in 1972, still haunted by those early hours when violence intruded suddenly into the night train. This caper became a defining moment in British criminal lore. The crime of the century, the Brits called it. Its sheer audacity, meticulous planning, and pop culture resonance created an enduring myth. It inspired films, ballads, books, and even musicals. As Piers Paul Reed put it in The Train Robbers, the gang had aimed to surpass the 1950 Brinks truck robbery in scale and public impact, and they did. But its legacy is not solely glamour. The lengthy prison terms were intended to deter copycats, and the scandal prompted serious reforms. Mail trains were upgraded with alarms, reinforced cars, radio systems, and GPS-type tracking. Scotland Yard's investigative methods, focused show trials, tight press control, rapid arrests became the model for handling serious organized crime in Britain. Moreover, the robbery came amid a Britain on the cusp of cultural upheaval. Harold Macmillan's government had already shifted, and the heist symbolized a nation wrestling with prosperity, inequality, and lawlessness. It embodied a kind of criminal bravado that hinted at the societal imbalances of the era. that 4 robbers escaped, that some sentences seem harsh, and that the loot was never fully recovered. These are the cracks that make this story still vivid today. In the end, the Great Train Robbery wasn't just a theft, it was a spectacle. Thanks for listening. This Friday on the Conversation series, I talked to Becky Aikman, the author of Spitfires, the American women who flew in the face of danger during World War II.
They were so independent in their thinking. And just to realize that women in the 1940s could be that way was a little bit of a shock to me. They were a tremendous variety of backgrounds, which was very surprising to the British, who expected women who had the resources to fly would be very aristocratic and well-behaved. But I do think they reflected a certain quality about the United States, which is that people from all different backgrounds can find a way to make things happen. A lot of women couldn't even drive a car back then, but these were all women who somehow convinced somebody to teach them to fly.